The trope of unspeakable actions being committed by the ultra-rich on private islands has become mainstream recently due to, well, you know. However, before there was Little St. James, there was actually another pedophile island.
Japan.
Michigan's North Fox Island. Before we dive into this, I just want to credit Simon Dovey and his excellent book, Eye of the Chickenhawk. It was an incredibly valuable resource with regards to helping structure this video in particular. It's one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. Each chapter is somehow darker than the last. However, if you're interested in learning more about this spiderweb of a topic, I highly recommend picking up the book. It contains far more information on the subject than I could possibly hope to cover in a video. Alright, to begin, let's go back to one of the unanswered questions from the Project Delta video. Oh, also, if you haven't seen that one yet, start there. This video is more like a direct continuation of that one. It turns out there's an answer to the question raised by the connections to New Orleans found by the FBI FOIA files on Philip Paske, Boy Scout Troop 137. In 1976, New Orleans police arrested two men by the names of Richard Halverson and Raymond Woodall, following an anonymous tip. Upon interrogation, the pair revealed the situation that they were in. 2 years earlier, in 1974, they had started a Boy Scout troop with the intent of using it as a front to produce, Okay, so given the topic of this series/mini-series, I keep having to talk around using a pair of words. One beginning with C and one beginning with P, that the platform sure doesn't like when you put next to each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the term chicken photography, which is a little bit letter of the law, and feels... It's the state of things online. Anyways, the pair set up a Boy Scout troop in 1974 with the intent of using it as a front to produce chicken photography. The pair made each other's acquaintance via both being employed as maintenance workers at the Adelphi Academy, which is a private school in Florida. This school was also formerly partly owned by a guy named Peter Bradford, who was another one of the 10 people eventually arrested by the New Orleans Police Department. Now, in addition, Troop 137 was explicitly tied to Project Delta. After being arrested, Raymond Woodall's house was searched and John Norman's contact info was found in his possession. The contact information of Woodall himself would later be found in Norman's possession. The New Orleans Police Department would also send a message to the Chicago Police Department mentioning Woodall and Halverson as acquaintances of Norman, warning them of chicken men in their area, attempting to set up a large-scale operation. Alright, now let's take a look back at something else covered in the Project Delta video. If you recall, while in prison, John Norman began the publication of a pornographic newsletter called Hermes. This was operated by Norman with the help of Philip Paske and was published by an operation called F&F Distributors. Oh well, in addition to Norman and Paske, Hermes also involved an editor by the name of David Berta. Well, in May of 1977, Berta was raided following information discovered while investigating a different part of this horrible web. A partial client list was seized, and for once, some of them were actually investigated and followed up on, including a successful Chicago area dentist by the name of Dr. Lloyd Lang. Lang wound up being arrested on suspicion of filming the sexual assault of an underage male by two men by the names of David Berta and John Bell. A search of his property turned up a video camera and film reels of the assault that Lang was suspected of filming, as well as 3 50-foot reels marked John Bell Michigan Trip. This John Bell, it would turn out, was involved as a director in a charitable organization in Michigan known as Brother Paul's Children's Mission. Back in Michigan, another man with a connection to Brother Paul's turned up approximately a year earlier. Gerald Richards was a gym teacher slash magician slash masseuse slash adult bookstore employee, who also happened to be the president of Brother Paul's. After being arrested with an envelope full of chicken photography and a suspiciously vague letter to someone named Frank Sheldon specifying like, oh yeah, get rid of your stuff, watch your mail, he agreed to testify about the operation in exchange for being able to plead down to lesser charges regarding an ongoing molestation case. He explained that he was involved in a ring producing chicken photography alongside a man named Francis Sheldon. The ring was based out of the nearby uninhabited North Fox Island, which Sheldon owned. The boys would get flown in on a private plane, landing on an airstrip Sheldon had paid to have constructed. The summer camp, Brother Paul's Children's Mission, was simply a front to provide a plausible explanation if people started to look into things. Richard then went on to provide some information on Sheldon himself. Francis Duffield Sheldon was a notable local figure, being the multi-millionaire heir of an industrialist family. Sheldon was educated at Millbrook and then went on to Yale, following the legacy of his father, Henry Sheldon, and his grandfather, Alan Sheldon. So I couldn't find any information about his or his father's specific experience at Yale. Alan Sheldon, though, his obituary confirmed his membership in Yale's secretive Skull and Bone Society. Those silly guys. On his mother's side, his grandfather was Russell Alger, an Army general, founder of a light bulb factory in Michigan, United States Secretary of War under William McKinley, governor of Michigan, and then senator from Michigan. My point is that Francis was a fancy lad, and clearly extremely well connected. Gerald Richards got to know Francis Sheldon through them both writing for a magazine called Better Life Monthly, which was more frequently known by its unofficial name, Boy Lovers Monthly. So upon writing to one another and discovering they were both based in northern Michigan, the two began to hatch a plan to set up a summer camp to operate as both a business and also a front to provide them with unmonitored access to young boys. There's an interesting and exceptionally poorly aged interview with Sheldon from 1975 published in the Detroit Free Press, which I will now read an excerpt from. Many weekends, he takes his young friends along to North Fox Island, as well as his adult friends. He rarely goes to the island alone, despite the fact that he says, "I suppose you could call me a semi-recluse." He says he goes to North Fox Island more than I should, and not as much as I like to. Several months of the year, when snow covers the airstrip, he doesn't visit the island at all. He's never been married. Now, in order to set up this organization, Sheldon got in contact with a friend of his, a man by the name of Dyer Grossman. Nominative determinism. Grossman was a similarly rich, old-money Long Island private school teacher, and ran in the same circles as Sheldon. He was also a reverend of the Church of the New Revelation, an organization that he had been involved in founding. Now, to be clear, this was not a real church in any way. There was no congregation, there was no chapel. This was something closer to, like, Kramerica Enterprises from Seinfeld. It's a catch-all, shell company-esque tax shelter. Grossman was well-versed in the world of tax fraud, having also been involved in creating an organization in New Jersey called the Ocean Living Institute, and a charity in Chicago called the Educational Foundation for the Youth of Illinois. Now, Grossman was typically not listed as the founder or president of any of these organizations. He would usually choose a second-in-command type role. The respective president and director of these organizations is someone we will get to shortly. Grossman advised Sheldon on the formation of Brother Paul's as a tax dodge and front, and helped him set it up as a subsidiary of the Church of New Revelation. Something else disturbing that wound up being uncovered was Grossman and Sheldon's plans to officially set up Brother Paul's as a foster home. Bizarrely, this seemed to be more about the state foster income than it even was about the, child molesting, which I guess just shows you where these rich bastards' heart truly lies. Richards also testified about the existence of other operations, including Odyssey/Project Delta, Troop 137, and something in Tennessee called Father Bud's Boys Farm. Father Bud's was a program that was sort of a troubled teen camp, where, if you caught your kid smoking weed or something, you could punish them by sending them to Tennessee to get molested. Boy, I'm sure glad that nothing like that still happens to this very day, specifically in the states of Florida, Montana, and Wyoming. There's also rumors of the operation either bribing or blackmailing a local judge into sentencing teens to the boys' farm for relatively minor infractions. However, I wasn't able to find a clear source on that part. Okay, I find that hard to believe. A judge accepting kickbacks to over-sentence teenagers to a state-funded private juvenile detention center? Pennsylvania. According to Richards, the structure of the organization as a whole functions something like this. Most of the films were shot either at Father Bud's or North Fox Island, using boys from Troop 137 or the Adelphi Academies. They would be abused either by paying clients or by members of the distribution ring themselves. Following this, the film reels would be sent to Richards to develop. After this, he would send the developed film reels to a mail forwarding company in North Carolina called Mail-O-Matic, where they would then be sent to a California-based chicken photographer by the name of Guy Straight. Nominative anti-determinism. In order to be duplicated and distributed via a company called F&F Distributors. Also, sometimes in these interviews called F&S distributors, I don't really know what the timeline between the switch is, but it's the same company. This is the same distribution company that Norman and Paske used to distribute Hermes. In an interview with Guy Straight called His Only Regret That He Was Caught, Straight describes, amongst other things, working specifically with John Norman in order to set up a, quote, neater package. The last name to come up here is one of the stranger ones of the lot. Richards testified that one of the few people somehow involved, at least tangentially, with all of these operations was a guy named Adam Starchild. Starchild, as it turned out, was a man originally named Malcolm McConaughey. Good Lord, that is an ugly man. After a string of legal incidents and problems in his personal life, including being removed from a position as a scout leader following a confession of sexual attraction to the scouts, McConaughey faked his death, published a fake obituary, and reemerged under the name Adam Starchild. Starchild made a name for himself as a proponent of the perpetual traveler movement, essentially advocating for becoming a stateless nomad through various legal loopholes. He would also accrue a significant rap sheet in the world of financial fraud. This is primarily what he was known for. He wound up managing Frank Sheldon's money as well after Sheldon fled to the Netherlands, and actually tried to just keep it, presumably under the auspice of, well, what are you going to do about it? Come back here? But Sheldon successfully sued for his money back, Anyways, Starchild was involved in the management of Brother Paul's Children's Mission. He was involved, at least in some degree, with Troop 137. He was the director, or president, I can't remember which, of Church of the New Revelation, as well as the one in New Jersey, the Ocean Living Institute, and the one in Chicago, the Educational Foundation for the Youth of Illinois, or something like they're all fake, dude. He handled the sale and purchase of the plane used to travel to North Fox Island. He was involved in organizing the construction of the airstrip. God knows what else. He really had his fingers in everything. So it's pretty safe to say that Starchild was 1, the logistics/money guy, 2, one of the primary links between all of the involved parties, and 3, judging by his prior vacation of his position as a scout leader, probably not only involved on the money side. All in all, much like Project Delta, very few people were meaningfully brought to justice for this. A few of the lower-level mooks and goons got. Some of the clients got arrested. Richards wound up being imprisoned for his other sex crimes. Sheldon fled to the Netherlands to avoid prosecution and died there sometime in the 80s or 90s. Grossman, I think, disappeared, and Starchild wound up doing time in the 80s for mail fraud and wire fraud, which is, I guess, the real crime here. So, to close out, I offer you a quote from Francis Sheldon himself. "On a calm day, you really learn what silence is, and at night, darkness." Freak.